Hello, YouTube. Today I'm going to be talking about my playthrough of Dragon's Dogma 2. I am quite conflicted on this game. There are elements of it that I think are incredible. However, a lot of the criticism that it received is completely valid. I think the DD2 drops the ball in many ways. There are many aspects of the game that I think are quite bad. But I think despite the negatives, I really enjoyed my time with it. I have nearly 100 hours on it, which is kind of crazy considering that one of my complaints is how light on content DD2 actually is. But I'll get into more detail the positives and negatives. I think this video will make it seem that I really hate this game because I think I'm going to have more complaints than compliments. But I think that what DD2 does well, it does it extremely well. Uh, and a lot of my negatives are various different aspects of the game, and some of them are entirely subjective. But at the end of the day, these videos are simply just my opinion, and some people might think otherwise. Before I begin talking about the combat, which in my opinion is the best part of DD2, I do want to have a section talking about the character creator. I think it is very good, one of the best in my opinion. Now, there is a disclaimer that I played with a mod that allowed me to buy the item to change the look of either my character or my pawn for essentially 1 gold. So I could pretty much change either, any of the looks, either my character or my pawn at any time that I wanted. And that helped me deal with some of the monotony of DD2. Now, I'll admit some of the monotony for my playthrough is just me not knowing certain things and not taking certain liberties to cut out some of the filler activities of the game. But regardless, it always kept it interesting for me, just changing how my character looked like. Now, for anyone that sees what my character and my pawn look like, you know, uh, I'm just gonna be honest. I tried to make them as hot as possible for my tastes, at least. So, and since I like tattoos quite a bit, the DD2 character creator actually gives you some very good tattoo options for your characters. So I spent a lot of time messing around in that character creator and just being able to change my character look anytime I want. Really, as cringe as it may sound, greatly contributed to my enjoyment of my playthrough. I think that if I was just playing the base game and that item called the Book of Metamorphosis was locked behind the cost of it just in the base game, its cost in the base game, I most likely wouldn't have changed my character's look, or I might have done it one time. And there's a very real possibility that I might have just gone bored. I might have just gone bored and possibly dropped the game. I know it's crazy that it's such a shallow thing to say, but it's true. So, I if you were to ask me, I recommend for anyone that plays this game to if you're gonna put any mods in it, find that mod that lets you get that item to change your character's look and just have fun and just whenever you're kind of bored of running around the map because you will be doing that a lot. Um, for me at least, changing the look of my character or my pawns helped a lot. So, uh, big thumbs up to DD2's character creator. It is actually quite detailed, better than most, and it is one of the best parts of the game, in my opinion. As that might sound a little cringe, but the end is just my opinion. Next, I want to talk about the combat. I think this is easily the best aspect of DD2. Now, I have never played DD1, and I've never played any other third person RPG slash action game that really played like this. I'm not saying that there is no other game out there that plays like this. I just haven't played one. So, and if I had to describe this in terms of previous games that I've played, it's it's almost like a fusion of Souls Combat and Monster Hunter. And it it has very deliberate attack animations, just like Dark Souls, but it is much slower, and it doesn't have a dodge roll, which is, at least how I play, the primary avoiding mechanic in those games. Uh, and similar to, this game shares a similarity with Monster Hunter in the sense that it doesn't have a lock on like a traditional Souls game. So that's the best way I can really describe it. It's almost like a combination of those two games, at least for me, it was. And the game can feel very Monster Hunter esque, especially when fighting some of the bigger enemies in DD2. I actually played through all of the vocations. Um, I maxed out almost all of them, with the exception of Thief, and I can safely say that with the exception of one vocation, which was Trickster, I greatly enjoyed my time with all of them. I think switching between each one once I had maxed it out kept the game fresh, and it kind of kept the game from getting stale. Once again, I'll get into this more detail in my negative section, but the game is a little light on content, and what kept me going a lot of the times is once I had maxed out a vocation, I would simply just switch to a different one, and most of them are quite fun to play. And I might have a detailed section later on in the video, just giving a quick thoughts on each location. But generally speaking, I think that they're all quite enjoyable to play. And I wish that I wish the game would have kept its difficulty towards the end of the game to really take advantage of the combat system here, because I think it is something very special. Once again, I think for a game that is light on content, for me to stick to it for almost 100 hours is truly a testament to how much fun I had engaging with the combat here. It is great. So now I'm going to talk about some of the negatives here. Many of these will be subjective. I think that some of these do depend on the type of person playing. So something that I might personally not like, someone else might enjoy. So do keep that in mind. First, I'm going to talk about the open world. Now, I've never been a huge fan of open world games. You know, while I greatly enjoy Elden Ring's combat, I'm not a fan of its open world. I think many open world games fall into the similar pitfall that once you've been inside world long enough, you really start to see the repeated assets, the repeated content, and this game is no exception. Um, there's going to come a point where once you've played enough, even before you get through like halfway through the game, you are going to have seen a lot of what this game has to offer in its open world. So, just like Elden Ring for me, at the very, very beginning, when everything is new, everything you're encountering is new, the game feels amazing. And the more that you play, the more you start to see the same enemies and the same stuff. And that sort of magic starts to fade. So, for me, like I stated in my section talking about the combat, what really carried this game was the combat. I don't think that its open world is particularly amazing. A lot of the times, the stuff that you find is just kind of not that exciting. I will say that probably one of the consistently more exciting things to find for me were um gold the gold scarabs, like the gold bugs on the trees, since they would increase your maximum equip limit. Another aspect or another way that I played this game is um since I wanted to get a specific armor item that is kind of a Coomer item, if the best way I can put it. It's a called the I forgot what it was called, but it's a corset. I'll put it in the background when I'm talking about this section. And to get this item, you have to collect the Seeker's tokens. They're basically like Korok seeds. Um, if you if I wanted to compare it to Breath of the Wild or like Jinjos from Banjo, these are basically the collectible of Dragon's Dogma 2. Now, Dragon's Dogma 2's map is quite large, and um, I used a guide to find these because trying to find these just by running around aimlessly, I'm not particularly looking to do that. So I spent a big chunk of the game essentially kind of glued to a guide, uh, trying to get, I believe it was 150 Seekers tokens so that I can get that piece of armor that I wanted. And, uh, this kind of inflated my playtime quite a bit because that took a long time to do. There's positive and negatives for this. I mean, on one hand, uh, looking for these Seekers tokens took me to parts of the map that I would have otherwise not even bothered going to. Uh, but on a more negative side of it, there's nothing particularly interesting in those parts of the map anyway. So, um, at the end of the day, I kind of wish those Seekers tokens weren't in the game. I would have preferred that piece of armor to be locked behind some kind of quest or some difficult combat encounter because once again for me the best aspect of DD2 is the combat and just running around with a guide and finding 150 of these coins was just quite monotonous to be honest with you. And towards the end of it, I was completely sick of it. I considered actually getting all 250 Seekers tokens, but towards the end, I just could not be fucked to do it. And hilariously, the final reward for getting all 200 and I think you need 220 of them for the final reward, if I'm not mistaken, but there's a total of 250 coins in the game. But regardless, the final reward of getting 220 Seekers tokens is like total garbage, like complete dog shit. It's not worth it at all. It essentially is a piece of equipment that makes your pawn level up its proficiency faster. But for me, I had actually maxed out all proficiencies of my pawn, and part of the reason is because there are certain vocations that a pawn cannot equip or cannot use. So by the end of my playthrough, my pawn had all proficiencies maxed. So getting this final item for 220 Seekers tokens is a total waste of time, and I did not even bother doing it because once again, it's simply just walking around with my head glued to a guide, collecting freaking Korok seeds. So I also want to talk about the difficulty of the game. I think that balancing situation is quite problematic. The game felt very, very great, very good at the early stages when you were at your weakest state. That's when the game felt the most kind of like a Monster Hunter esque game, where the large enemies would be, they would pose a threat. It would be a big deal, at least in my case, fighting one of these large monsters, and it's almost like the inverse of that. The later stages of the game, once you get, I want to say even like maybe mid game, maybe like a little bit past the mid game, you'll very quickly just start completely destroying these enemies. I mean, they become almost inconsequential. Um, which the only way to really even lose or die is just to straight up troll. Um, and I could be wrong, but I'm fairly positive that the enemies do not scale. So, that becomes a problem the later the game that you get. Um, Admittedly, I think what also might have caused this problem in my specific playthrough is collecting all of those seeker tokens, and that may have caused me to become over leveled. But I just wish that the difficulty would pick up on the later stages of the game, because even when getting to the second area, the major second desert area of the game, um, the difficulty never really hits that level that it did in the early stages of the game. Another thing that causes balancing issues, in my opinion, are some of the abilities. I think that for me, there's three abilities that I think, in my opinion, and I could be wrong. I'm not a Dragon's Dogma 2 expert, but just from my experience, seem extremely broken. Um, I'll talk about those in a little bit more detail in the section of the video where I briefly just go over my thoughts on each vocation, but I'll mention them quickly here. Thief has an ability that basically makes you invincible. It costs stamina to activate it. And while it's active, you essentially auto dodge. I'm not entirely sure if you are truly invincible to like AoE attacks, like meteor strike from the dragon enemies or stuff like that. But effectively, you're almost invincible, even if those AOE attacks actually hit you. But I'm not entirely sure. Again, I only got Thief to level 4. Another skill that I want to mention is Mage's High Palladium. I think this skill becomes more egregious when you, the player, are either playing Mage or select this skill if you're playing the Warfare class. Essentially, High Palladium basically gives you it almost puts like a two-hit shield on you and your party. Um, and it is very powerful in my opinion. I think it really becomes kind of overpowered when you, the player, are controlling it, since the AI in DD2 is not particularly great. You won't always have uptime on it, but when you yourself have control of when to use it, I mean, you can more or less have permanent uptime on this skill, and it almost just feels like you're unkillable. Okay, another spell that functions very similarly is the Mystic Spearhand Shield. Um, I almost think it's even more broken than High Palladium, because High Palladium, at the very least, if you or your party members get hit in quick succession, there might be some situations where you won't have uptime on it. But the Mystic Spearhand Shield, it is quite literally like while the shield is active, you are effectively invincible, and you can fairly easily have permanent uptime on this shield. Mystic Spearhand has a skill that essentially drains stamina from enemies. So especially with the larger enemies, um, like you can effectively just spam that shield, and you and your party members are invincible. And the moment you start running low on stamina, you just get all your stamina back and cast the shield again. The cast time is very quick. It's High Palladium for Mage actually has some degree of a cast time, but the Mystic Spearhand Shield it's very fast. Um, So, when you combine certain broken abilities and broken classes, like I didn't even go over Magic Archer, which my understanding is the strongest class in the game. Um, the game can very quickly be trivialized and almost broken in a sense if you use what is powerful. So in some ways it's like, do you have to limit yourself to just bad skills just to not completely break the game? I personally think that if I honestly think these three skills that I mentioned should not even exist. But if you're going to have skills that are these powerful, you have to have enemies who are also as powerful. And unfortunately, DD2 just doesn't have that. So in the later stages of the game, um, the difficulty is just totally cooked. And even in the very last area of the game, in quick spoiler note, um, the very last area right before you finish the game, in the like true ending, I guess, where it's called the Unworld World. It's basically the final area before the game is over. There are four bosses that you can fight, and these are effectively the four final bosses, in the game. And I mean, you know, they just got completely cooked. Like it was a complete slaughter. Ironically, the hardest combat encounter I had in DD2 was the Chimera enemy very, very early on. But past that early difficulty spike when you are, at your weakest state, the game is very, very easy. Um, so I do think that the difficulty is a problem. Um, and another complaint that I had is, and this is, keep in mind, this is entirely subjective. I fully realize that um, this complaint is just an opinion. There might be people that might actually like the very thing that I'm complaining about. But for me, again, this is just a video talking about my opinion. Um, is the quest design. So I actually completed every quest in my playthrough that, you know, most likely contributed to my crazy long playtime. Um, and some of these quests are the best way I can describe them is that they're very puzzle-ish. You know, um, just to give an example, like the total inverse of this will be a quest where, you know, the objective is displayed on your map and you know where to go, and the objective is just, beat this enemy or collect this item or whatever, and then there's sort of like the complete inverse of that, which are quests that you almost have to solve, like you have to figure out. Um, the Dark Souls games have quest design that is more or less like this, where when you talk to an NPC or you initiate a quest chain, you don't really know what the next step is. I mean, like the NPC might tell you like go here or do this, but that's never explicitly told to you on any sort of map or any sort of marker. You kind of have to sometimes part of the quest is sort of figuring out what to do. And Dragon's Dogma 2 has a lot of quests that are like this. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of these. Um, but admittedly, I'm just not a big puzzle person. So I very much prefer just like tell me what you want me to do. Where do I go? Like, what do you like me to fight? What combat encounter do I have to overcome? Again, part of the reason why this is because to me the best aspect of DD2 is the combat. Um, so I did not particularly enjoy a lot of these quests that are kind of fairly cryptic. Um, now, I used the guide for a lot of these because I would have not been able to figure them out without it. And without a guide, some of these quests would have just devolved into me just running around aimlessly, trying to figure out what to do. Some people might enjoy this. I mean, I'm sure there are folks that like this sort of puzzle, type of quests. But for me, I'm not a huge fan of it. Another thing I want to talk about is the story. Um, the story just never really gripped me. And even though I did every quest, oftentimes after finishing a quest, I would think like, well, that was completely pointless. Um, like I just never really got too involved in many of the characters. There are two characters which you can sort of have this sort of pseudo romance scene, and I mean those are probably like the two most interesting quests in the game. But there was never really a moment in DD2 that I finished a quest and I was like, wow, that was absolutely incredible. That just blew me away. And I'll actually drop a quick example here. There was a quest that I actually found fairly interesting. And I guess a bit of a spoiler warning, I guess. It was a quest called Saint of the Slums, which is basically this, in the slum area of the main city. There was a sort of nun character who would take care of the sick people. Um, but in reality, she was kind of, and I'm going off by memory here, so I could be wrong on some aspects here, but essentially, like she would take care of these citizens, but in reality, she was making them more sick. Um, and she had some kind of, I feel stupid because I can't remember exactly how the reason why she did it, but she had some kind of deal, like some kind of business deal with like a shady character. And basically part of the quest is like uncovering the truth from this sort of nun character. And the reason why I'm talking about this quest is because the ending of it was very, very Resident Sleeper. I mean, it was so like this was not worth it at all. Um, it's almost like once you find her meeting with this shady character, um, the next scene she's in jail, and then the quest is over. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's no like big payoff. At least for me, that didn't really feel like there was. And I'm using this as an example because a lot of the quests really felt like this, where um, I just, for the most part, did not care very much about any of these characters. Um, but I will. I know this is the section where I'm talking about the negatives, but I do want to talk about a positive here at the very, very, very end of the game, which again, another spoiler, that kind of made doing these quests worth it. When you complete the game, the I guess the true ending. I hope I'm referring it correctly, but the ending that has you go to the unmoored world, which is what I did. It will play this essentially this ending movie, and the ending movie is kind of customized to your playthrough of the game. So, since I did every quest, or I'm fairly positive I did every quest, my ending movie actually showed a lot of these characters that I did quests for, sort of, thriving in this new world. Essentially, like you're the hero that kind of saved the world, and when you do these quests, you'll see these characters living their lives. And when I looked up, other people's endings, their ending movie was not the same as mine. Like they might have not done a specific quest, and that instead of showing, this character like going about their day, it just shows like an empty landscape. So even though while doing the quests, I did not feel particularly engaged, seeing the payoff of completing some of these appear in this sort of custom ending movie was actually really cool. So I'm gonna get the DD2 credit for that. That was like I like that way more than I expected. Like seeing that ending movie, and the song was really good as well. I really really like the song. So another complaint I want to talk about is I've said it before in the video, is lack of content of the game. And it's such a strange situation because once again, my total playtime of DD2 was close to 100 hours, but I also collected 150 Seekers tokens and I did all of the side quests. A lot of the other aspects of my playthrough that contributed to this super long playtime is just me not knowing that you could pick up a port crystal. Like I thought when you put a port crystal down, it's stuck there forever. So I was always scared of using it because I didn't want to put it in a stupid spot. So I walked everywhere. There are many times where I needed to check to see if a quest I could finish was in a town that I couldn't cart to, and I would walk there and I would just waste my time literally. That also probably contributed to me getting over leveled. Um, but if I were to play the game again, knowing what I know now, knowing that, whenever you get a port crystal, you should just use it. Not doing every side quest, just focusing on the main story, and maybe doing a couple of side quests. I genuinely think that this game can be completed in like less than 20 hours. I mean, especially like if you just focus the main story, like this game is very very light on content. And honestly, maybe that's the optimal way to play. Maybe that's how you have to play, and you'll stay kind of underleveled, and the combat will, um, the combat encounters will feel more difficult. It's entirely possible that I just kind of screwed my own playthrough by messing around too much. Um, Elden Ring. I know I keep talking about Elden Ring, but again, I can draw a lot of comparisons between the two. Has a similar situation where if you do all of the content that Elden Ring has to offer, the same thing can happen, and you can very quickly become overleveled. Like if you do all of the side dungeons, for example, um, which there are a lot of in Elden Ring, the same situation can occur. So, but I did want to mention the fact that yeah, if you are just focusing the main story, I mean, like this game is like, not worth $60 or $70, however much it was. There is very little content to work with here, and I did want to mention that. This final part of sort of my complaints with the game are just kind of miscellaneous stuff that I can think of off the top of my head. One of them is this mechanic that's called I think like dragon sickness or something, and essentially when you rest at a town, your pawn can literally just kill almost every NPC in that town. It actually happened to me towards the end of the game. Thankfully, it wasn't in one of the major cities. It was on the Volcano Island camp or something like that. Um, and I know this mechanic is supposed to be kind of cool, and I'm glad it happened so I could see what the cutscene looked like. But this can, potentially like undo many hours of progress if you haven't, if you don't have like a recent save or something. And I'm not particularly a huge fan of it. Uh, I know that there's like some subtle hints, and this is sort of like going back to when I was talking about these puzzle-ish sort of quests, where this game is very much like this, where it gives you like this subtle hint of like this could happen, but it's just hard to tell if it's just lore or if it could have gameplay implications. And in this case, it could potentially be a very big gameplay implication if it happens in the wrong town. So yeah, I'm not a huge fan of that. Additionally, I want to talk about the quest to get the two, um, not mage, the two spells for the wizard class. I can't remember exactly what it was called. Sorcerer. That's what it was. Sorcerer. So to get the two sort of elite spells, each class has sort of an ultimate skill, um, and they can range from being fairly easy to just absolute hell to get, and getting the sorcerer one is just absolute. Like doing this without a guide is just the most absurd thing I've ever seen. Um, there's this quest called Spellbound that essentially um, requires you to give these key items to this NPC. Um, and I'm gonna go into detail of this because I think that without a guide, this quest like is just one of the most obtuse quests I've ever seen. So there are essentially five key items, five tomes or five books, right? And this NPC wants three of them, but you can make forgeries of the book. Now, the game doesn't really, I mean, there is a forgery shop in one of the towns, but I don't really think the game did a great job at sort of explaining, like, you know, how to use it. I still don't know every use of it, every use of the forgery shop. Some of it is just quest related. Like there was another quest where you had to make a forgery of something. The point I'm trying to make is that in order to get all spells in the game, right, all the elite spells, which there are two elite spells for sorcerer and one support one healer one for mage, you have to complete the spellbound quest, and then there's another quest with another NPC, and they both want these books that there's only five of. And two of those, and two out of those five, you can get an additional legitimate copy of in the game, right? And this quest devolved in essentially like you know it requires so much planning to do. You essentially have to make sure that um you make forgeries for some of these so that like it's like yeah, okay, now I remember. So these NPCs want all five books, but in order for the quest to succeed, you have to give them three legitimate copies, right? So in order to get both spells, you have to give one NPC three real copies and two forgeries, and then the other NPC also three real copies and two forgeries, I believe. And it's almost like the game gives you exactly what you need to do this. And it's just like as I was doing this quest, it was just I was sitting there thinking like how like there's no way in hell I would have ever figured this out. Um, and actually to get one of these books, you have to go to this town that's like all the way on the upper right side of the map and trade one of these books, right? One of the books that you need to complete both of these quests to get those spells, you have to give one of them to this random freaking lady, um, for her to give you one of the missing ones, right? So, what you're supposed to do is give her a forgery, right? You're not, don't give her a real one. You give her a, so it's, and keep in mind, guys, like this village to get one of these five books and the forgery store are like the complete opposite ends. Like they are very far away from each other. Um, the whole point I'm making with this tangent is that like this was like one of the most asinine quests I've ever done in a game in a long time. Okay, and the amount of steps and planning required to get these spells is just stupid. I know that there might be a person out there that really like that, again, that puzzle slash planning element of it. But for me, like this is just way too obtuse to be fun. I mean, like if I got to keep my head glued to a guide to not fuck up this quest, like I'm just not a huge fan of it. Continuing on with my sort of miscellaneous complaints, is that there's pretty much, and I'm going off of memory here, there really only felt like there were two dungeons in this entire game. There is the dungeon early on that has that skeleton enemy. I forgot what they're called. I'll put the footage on the screen, and it has that chimera on it. This is fairly early on, and then the dungeon to go through to get to Volcanic Island Camp. I'm not, and going off of memory, like those are the only two instances of DD2 that felt like actual dungeons that you progress from start to finish. There's all these little caves and stuff scattered around the map, but they are very, very tiny. They're very small. Actually, I'm gonna give one more sort of dungeon to DD2, which is this sort of mountain that you have to climb to fight this dragon. That was actually fairly, that was a journey to climb the mountain, fight all the enemies, and fight the dragon. Uh, with the mystics, with the NPC that gives you the Mystic Spearhand class. But uh, my point still stands. There are very, very little sort of long form dungeon like instances in DD2, and I wish there were more. Once again, for me, the combat carried the entire experience, and you know, most of the game really is just walking around in this open world, and once you've played enough, you've already seen everything there is to see, and it's just you're just kind of going through the motions. Which hence the reason why, for me, a lot one of the reasons that kept my attention going is just changing what my character looked like a million times. I spent like close to 5 hours total in my playthrough just in the character creator screen. So another thing I like to point out is, and I believe this only happens when your pawn's like friendship value is high enough. I still don't really fully know how to build this up. I think part of it is just don't like throw your pawn off a cliff and stuff. Like just don't purposely kill your pawn. But regardless, like there is this towards the end of the game, there is this sort of big cinematic moment where you um have to stop this big giant golem dude from like reaching this encampment. And I just want to quickly talk about that. I thought that sucked. I absolutely hated it, and I actually wasted a decent chunk of time because, um, and I might just be an idiot. Honestly, I might just be stupid. But I thought I just had to make it to the village, but you have to like shoot down like the glowing parts of the golem. And my first attempt at doing this, like I get to like the village and like the door is closed and I'm just standing there like an idiot, not knowing what to do. It was only after I did some research that I realized, oh, I have to do this again and reload a previous save. Um, but later on, after you've destroyed this golem thing, that's just after you beat it, it kind of just stands there. Towards the end of the game, if your pawn has a high enough friendship value, I think, they will sort of take control, and it's not like you're controlling this big giant golem. It's a cutscene, right? Your pawn will essentially kill one of the four sort of final monster bosses of the Unworld world via a cutscene, which it's supposed to be like this sort of cool moment, and I mean, I guess it is, from a cinematic slash story perspective, but from a gameplay perspective, it almost like deleted a boss that I could have fought, and I didn't get a chance to fight them. So even though the Unworld world is supposed to have four bosses, you know, four sort of final bosses before the final sort of ending cutscene of the game, I only really got to fight three of them because that fourth one was defeated in a cutscene. Um, and just another thing to point out in the Unmoored World ending, there really isn't a final boss. Once you have the ability to sort of enter the last sort of beacon that activates the end of the game, I mean, it's pretty much just a cutscene and the credits. So really, the final boss, when doing the Unmoored World ending, are those sort of four monsters that you fight, and just to have one of them be beaten in the cutscene is kind of hilarious because I would have honestly preferred to fight them myself. So this section, I just want to give just a brief sort of opinion on each of the vocations. So I'll start with Archer. I very much enjoyed Archer. I wasn't sure how it would play, but um, I did enjoy sort of getting the timing down of getting the triple shot with just your basic attack. Like if you wind it up, you'll fire three arrows. There was pretty much only you only really have room for four skills anyway. But the two skills that I really use the most is definitely arrow, which I do think that this skill is kind of cool because there's a timing element to it. So you essentially wind up a shot, and if you time it right, you'll do extra damage. And then probably my favorite ability of the whole class is Tempest Shot, which you're basically just rapid firing a bunch of arrows. I mean, you're really supposed to do this when like whatever is you're fighting is downed, or kind of they can't move very much. And it was very satisfying, especially from a sound design perspective when you are hitting a monster's weak spot with this Tempest Shot. You're just hearing that sound over and over again. Uh, then there's also I did use the basically like the ultimate a decent amount of times, which I believe it was what it's called, but I just like most ultimates in the game, uh, would use pretty much all of your stamina. Yeah, that's what it was called, Heavenly Shot. And it's pretty much you just um, use all your stamina to fire a high damaging move. I do believe there's a timing element to it as well, so it's just fairly standard. I enjoyed the class for what it was. It's not. I wouldn't say it's my favorite class, um, but I did like it. So there's that. Next, I'm going to talk about fighter. This was actually one of the classes that I enjoyed a lot. Um, it's quite mobile. One of my favorite skills that it had was Blink Strike, which it kind of like propels you forward to an enemy. And I've always liked movement-based abilities, so I like Blink Strike a lot. Like that skill alone contributed to me liking the class quite a bit. Um, there's also the gouging attack, which I believe we get like a unique animation when whatever is you're hitting is downed. So that was also very satisfying to knock enemies down and then do the sort of the gouging skewer attack as a finisher. Um, I didn't really use a lot of the shield spells of the class, but one of the defensive spells that I quite liked was Hindsight Sweep, I believe is what it's called, which kind of like a dodge roll. It's really like the closest thing to a dodge roll uh, that DD2 has, and if you time it right, you believe you would get like extra. Yeah, if you do like a perfect dodge, you would get an extra attack after the roll. I didn't really pull it off very often, but the few times I was able to pull it off, it was very satisfying. And then lastly, I want to talk about the um, fighter ultimate, which I believe is called Righteous Fury. This, in my opinion, was one of my favorite ultimates. I believe is one of the few ones that didn't leave you completely out of stamina. So, and it was very satisfying. It's just this 5 hit combo, and it felt like very good damage, and I liked it quite a bit. So, overall, fighter was actually one of my favorite vocations to play. Next, I'll talk about Mage. Mage was the first class that I played. Like as soon as I booted up the game, is what I picked, and I'm a little conflicted on Mage. On one hand, it is a support class. It's not meant to do a huge amount of damage. Um, Pretty much the damage spell that I would use early on was the Thunder one, which is whatever. I mean, honestly, it's not particularly exciting since the game kind of auto locks on to whatever it is you're fighting. Um, but I did sort of mention that I think a player controlled mage is actually pretty decent. More, the only reason is just a high palladium spell. You can, if you keep a good enough uptime on this, um, you could almost feel invincible. Another spell that I tried using, but it just never really felt that satisfying, was High Empyrean, which is like this big ball of light that does damage. But Mage is just not a big damage dealing class from my experience, and it just never really felt that satisfying to use. Um, and in addition to the spells I've mentioned, I mean, Mage has a spell that cures like ailments, and in addition to other buffs like the elemental buffs. But honestly, Mage was kind of whatever for me. I did like its ultimate. I don't know, it was kind of satisfying to use. You get this like cool cutscene, and I actually think Celestial Peon, which is the Mage ultimate, it feels quite good, but it's kind of the inverse that I like having this on an AI controlled mage, because when Celestial Peon is cast, it gives basically unlimited stamina to all of the allies, right? So when I'm playing mage and I'm casting Celestial Peon, I'm the one that's gassed out of stamina, while the AI gets to reap the benefits of having unlimited stamina. Um, so it's kind of like the inverse of that. I do think High Palladium is crazy when you the player control when to use it. Um, but you're probably going to have more fun with this game if you have the AI control the mage. So, just a quick mention, just honorable mention to Levitate. I do like Levitate quite a bit. It's one of my sort of favorite passives um, in the game. So, yeah. I'll quickly talk about Thief. This is probably the class I'll have the least to say about, since I didn't make it past level 4 here. So some of these skills that become available later, I just won't be able to comment on. But I will comment on. I do like the movement, um, especially the I believe it's called Cutting Wind, which is essentially like a dash that you can end with an attack. And similar to the movement skill in Fighter, I really like this ability. It's a lot of fun to just be zooming around the map. Um, Thief also is able to buff itself by giving themselves sort of like a fire buff for their weapons. So it's not the most exciting thing, but a lot of these other, because I'm looking at the list of skills here, um, I just didn't really get to use very much. There are some thief skills that rely on you climbing the monster. I didn't really mention this earlier in the video, but I was never a fan at all of climbing onto the large enemies. Like I want to fight them. The best comparison I can make this is something like Monster Hunter Rise that allows you to sort of ride the monsters and like get like a very limited version of their moveset. When it comes to any of these games, like I want to fight using the tools available to my class or my weapon or whatever. The whole climbing thing, I was just never a fan of. So, um, any of these thief skills that are sort of stronger when you're climbing onto the monster, I just most likely wouldn't have used anyway. And then lastly, I mentioned it earlier in the video. I do want to talk about the ultimate. I believe it's called Formless Feint, which I think is just absolutely cracked broken, especially if you have a mage with Celestial Paean. If the mage gives you Celestial Paean, you can pretty much activate Formless Feint, and for however long that's active, I mean, you are quite literally invincible. Um, it seems kind of like a very lazy ability to have. Um, and yeah, I think it's broken. Next, I want to talk about Mystic Spearhand. I think this is probably my favorite class in the game, but I also do think, to me, at least in my opinion, feels like one of the strongest vocations in the game. But there's a lot for me to like about this class. I mean, it's almost like the all rounder for me. On one hand, you have a projectile that you can throw at enemies, but why I like this projectile is because when you time a button press afterward, you can dash to whatever it is that you hit. So this is a very, very mobile um, vocation. It also has this dash. I think it's called Dragon's Foin, if I'm not mistaken. It's this like dash that you can do in the air. It is just probably my favorite ability in the game, honestly. You can use it in the air. It's just a lot of fun. Another thing I want to talk about is um, the shield, which I talked about briefly earlier. I think the shield is absolutely broken. I think it's the most broken ability in the game. Um, once it's leveled up, you can pretty much have permanent uptime on it. Um, in combination with the ability that lets you basically sap a target's stamina. I think it's called Ravenor's Honed. I hope I pronounced that right. But especially when you're fighting a big enemy that is not very mobile. Again, just spam the shield. If you're running low on stamina, you suck all your stamina back. You recast the shield, and no one's ever going to take any damage. Um, Another spell that I used a lot when I played Mystic Spearhand was I think it's called Magique Barragone. I'm probably pronouncing it wrong, but it's basically this charged, almost like projectile. And I really like this ability because it almost felt like I had a rotation. Like my rotation was like, and I'm not even saying this is optimal. This is just what I came up with when I was playing. Where you would charge this sort of projectile, which does a lot of damage, right before you run out of stamina, and then suck all your stamina back. So it almost felt like, um, you can have a very tight rotation while also managing your stamina and preventing yourself from fully depleting all of it. Because in this game, when you use all your stamina, you kind of like fall to the ground, and one of your party members has to help you up. Um, Regrettably, the one thing that I didn't try because I just maxed out the vocation before I even got the spell. I actually don't can't even remember if I got the spell to begin with. I never used it in my whole playthrough. Was the ultimate for Mystic Spearhand, which is regrettable. I feel like I would have probably liked the class even more if I got a chance to mess around with it. But overall, Mystic Spearhand is definitely my favorite class in the game. Next, I'm going to talk about Magic Archer. I think it's pretty common knowledge that this is the strongest class in the game. I can definitely see why, and it's kind of funny because in my playthrough, I was like quite literally trolling the early stages of playing the class just because I really hadn't grasped how the targeting system works. So essentially, like when you're going to shoot at something, you'll see these little things fill up on your reticle, and when they're fully filled up, you release, and then it shoots up all the arrows. And Magic Archer class has almost like two modes. It has like a single target mode and AOE mode. And I don't know what I was thinking, but essentially for a decent chunk of me playing this class, I was literally just trolling, and using the class like not very effectively. Um, Overall, I think Magic Archer. I mean, it's fun because it's very powerful, but it's certainly not my favorite. It does have kind of a couple cool abilities I want to talk about. Is the like this fire arrow that you can actually like control, and like aim at the monster. And then it has this. I'm trying to find the ability that like I used a lot. I think it was called Bolt Chain. I'm sorry. I forgot what it was called, but it did like an insane amount of damage. And it pretty much functioned the same way as just the regular windup, where you hold your reticle at whatever is you're firing, and it was just like absurd damage. I mean, that's pretty much all I used when using Magic Archer towards the end of the game. Is I would just use my regular auto attack, and when I had stamina, I would use that spell that essentially functioned almost identically to the auto attack. It was just a stronger version, and you would just do insane damage. I know Magic Archer has a lot of utility too with like healing and stuff, but I just never really used it. I never really needed to use it, so I pretty much just used those two. Like I just played the class very basic on a very basic manner. So, but yeah, it's very powerful. I can see why. I mean, the damage it can dish out is absolutely crazy. Next, we'll talk about Sorcerer. I think Sorcerer is more fun than Mage because it's more damage oriented. And I kind of wanted Sorcerer to be my favorite, but honestly, it really wasn't. Um, yeah, it actually shares spells from Mage, like Levin and I think Flagration is what it's called. Now, one thing I do like about Sorcerer is sort of their passive ability that you kind of enter this like meditative state and you regain your mana. So Sorcerer spells use a lot of mana, and they have a high charge time, but you can make the charge time shorter by consuming more mana. So it almost felt like similar to Mystic Spear Hand, where you kind of had this like rotation where you wanted to use your spells and be left with just a tiny bit of mana, and then gain all your mana back through your sort of passive skill. Um, I do also want to talk about sorcerers. I think the ability is called Flare, which would just like deal crazy damage. Basically you put Flare on the enemy, and the more it gets hit, when Flare pops, it does more damage, right? So you put this sort of debuff on the enemy, and you hit them, and then that debuff sort of detonates, and it does high damage. I use that ability quite a bit. I obviously, even towards the latter half of me leveling up the vocation, I still always use the Levin ability. I did use the ice field. I think it's called Haggle. I like that one quite a bit. I used Thundermine a little bit early on, but I towards the end I chose to swap it out. And then you have the two ultimates, which are I believe it's Meteoron and Maelstrom. Um, Maelstrom looks really cool, and it's good in situations where there's a lot of enemies around you. I just don't think that the game puts you in enough spots where I really felt the need to use it. Again, once again, guys, I mean, maybe I was just super over leveled from fucking around too much, collecting the tokens and walking around everywhere rather than teleporting. But I just never really felt the need to use any of them. Like, I would almost just use them for like because they looked cool, you know. And of course, both of these are kind of a pain because they completely use all your stamina, and using all your stamina, your character basically falls to the ground completely exhausted, and one of your NPC companions has to sort of like pick you back up so you can act again. So I mean, they they look cool, they're okay, but they weren't the most fun for me, that's for sure. But I did play a lot of Sorcerer, and I mean, I enjoyed it, but it's certainly not my favorite. I think I liked Fighter more. I definitely like Mystic Spearhand more, and I almost want to say I might have even liked Archer more, to be honest. So. The next class I'll talk about is Warrior. This is basically sort of like the Monster Hunter Greatsword class of DD2. It's slow with high wind up for your attacks, but it's supposed to be do big damage. I think one of my problems with that I have with this class is since the game doesn't really display numbers for how much damage you're doing. Um, I never really saw like enemies' health just like deplete in the same way as some other abilities for other classes. Like Mystic Spearhand's charged projectile. I would like noticeably the enemy's health bar just disappear. And like for how much I played Warrior, like it just never really felt all that satisfying. Um, I do like how there's like a timing element to it, especially with your regular auto attacks, where if you release it when you sort of blink, if you charge it, you'll do more damage. I do actually really like the AOE skill. I think it's called like Blazing Sweep or something. It's actually really satisfying when you hit multiple of like the smaller enemies with it. I would say probably my favorite move, just probably because it looks really cool, was Indomitable Slash, which is like this just big slam. Charge just like pretty much anything else, and it just I don't know. I just really like how it looked. It was really satisfying. Is it the most efficient or strongest move? I'm not particularly sure, to be honest with you, but I did enjoy using it a lot. I know that um, Warrior has skills that are good against large enemies. Like there's this like upwards stab that is supposed to be really good against large enemies, but and I'm sure that it is. I just never, I'm just kind of indifferent towards it. Um, the other ability that I did like a lot was Windstorm Slash because after you sort of do this attack, you can enter this state where you can keep swinging over and over again. But to keep swinging, you have to like time it, And I did like that element of it, sort of that skill expression where, you have to get your timing right to, fully utilize that ability. And I don't even think I really ever used it that well myself. Like I didn't really master the timing particularly well, but that was probably one of my favorite abilities. Now I will mention this, probably my least favorite um, ultimate was Arc of Might, which is Warrior's ability. I found it very hard to use, and I rarely like got much out of it. I think that you have to hit like a weak spot for it to really pop off, and it's really hard because I mean you have to charge this for a very very long time. I mean it also leaves you, I believe it leaves you completely out of stamina as well, with many of these other attacks. So overall, I did like Warrior, but I didn't like it as much as I would say probably Fighter or Mystic Spearhead. But one thing that I really really liked about this class is the timing element of it, when that allows you to keep swinging continuously if you get the timing down on your swings. So that is a really cool aspect of this class. Now I'm going to talk about the one class that I really did not like very much, which was Trickster. I actually very much like the what Trickster sort of represents, like the idea of it. My issue with Trickster is that you are basically completely incapable of doing any damage at all. I really think that they should have at least given you some way to deal some type of damage. Um, one thing I noticed, and Trickster was one of the final vocations that I played because I don't know, I just unlocked it last. What often happened is you use all your Trickster abilities, which are basically just you're like CC, you're CCing the enemy. And I would do the Mirage Dragon, or I'll put the wall or whatever, or I'll draw aggro from the enemies, and the AI companions would just like literally troll. I mean, um, and it's just so annoying. Those situations where there would be all these smaller enemies, and I'm just at the mercy of the AI doing damage, and sometimes they just wouldn't. The AI has this really annoying habit, especially with the mage classes, of floating for no reason. There were so many instances where I noticed this the most when playing Trickster, is I would, use all my abilities. I, have aggro. I've done everything the trickster can do for the most part, and then I would see my mage companions just floating and not using their spells. When they're floating, when they're levitating, they can't use spells. They're just using regular auto attacks. It was just so annoying because like the AI is just stupid. The AI is just dumb. Uh, and Trickster's just not really that fulfilling to play for me. It really wasn't very fun. I was praying for every moment for me just to get it to level 10 so I don't ever have to play it again. And I think the class would have been cool if it could just do some type of damage. Um, but alas, this is probably the one class that I really didn't enjoy at all. Lastly is Warfare, which is basically like your own custom class. I actually really like this because you can take your favorite uh, abilities from every other vocation and sort of create your own custom class, and you can very quickly switch between weapons from the other classes. So towards the very end of the game, like when I was in the unmoored world, that's what I was using was Warfare. I like Warfare a lot. I was able to, have High Palladium, for example, as one of my abilities, which will let me have access to the Mage passive, and I could heal. Um, and I would have like I think the Magic Archer high damage skill for damage. So it's just cool to be able to use different weapons on the fly and sort of create your own custom class. So I like Warfare quite a bit. Too bad I really didn't get to play with it that much because by the time I was using it, the game was almost over. But admittedly, I will say that Warfare was probably one of my favorites. If they was some kind of DLC or some kind of like post game difficult challenge or whatever to get through, I would probably use Warfare or Mystic Spearhand. So, but yep, that is pretty much all the classes. So I think that pretty much covers everything I wanted to say about Dragon's Dogma 2. It's a bit of a tragic game for me because I truly fell in love with combat. It was so much fun, but the game just has a lot of shortcomings uh, for me on many other aspects that it's hard for me to really even like recommend it. Like um, in a perfect world, I would take Dragon Dogmas to uh, combat and like plop it onto like Dark Souls 3 or something. Give me like a dungeon to get through. Like, give me more challenging encounters. Um, like I just don't care for like these obtuse like puzzle quests or just walking around in this open world, um, fighting the same enemies over and over and over and over again. I mean, admittedly for me, my favorite parts of the game was the two maybe three sort of dungeons the game has to offer, but um, it is a shame. I mean, it is what it is. I can't really fault the game too much since I got 100 hours out of it. We're all 100 hours. I mean, incredible. Eh, debatable. But nevertheless, I'm glad I played it. I'm glad I got to experience the game, and I'm honestly not quite sure what score to give it. Um, I almost want to, with a 5 being average. Honestly, I don't think I can really give this more than a 6. It's also kind of rough for me to give it a 5. For me, and again, this score is basically like my enjoyment of the game. I don't claim that this is some kind of like objective, correct scoring for Dragon's Dogma 2. I mean, it's all subjective at the end of the day. But I hesitate to give it a 5 because hey, like I played the game a lot. I played it quite a bit. Um, but all the negatives really hurt the game for me. So I think I'm gonna end up with a 6 out of 10. Do I recommend it? Uh, I don't know. It's hard. It's a hard recommend to be honest. If someone were to ask me, like I would almost have to give them a disclaimer, like, hey, for one, if you can get the game for cheap, sure. Is this game worth $60? Not really. Once again, guys, again, my playthrough was kind of unique because I wanted that Coomer corset item. So I collected the Seeker's tokens, which was not fun. Um, I also did every side quest, which like do I recommend someone do every side quest? Like I haven't played The Witcher 3, but like I'm willing to bet that a game like The Witcher 3 is going to have way more fulfilling, you know, side quests where like the actual events of the side quests will be interesting. Unfortunately, like the side quests in ED2 just were not that interesting, man. They really weren't. I didn't really get attached to too many of the characters with the exception of the two um female characters that you can romance. I guess even that is like I hesitate to even say that I got attached to them. I mean, I did the quest and it was probably two of the more involved quests in the game. But like, I mean, I don't even remember their names. So like, I mean, how attached could I have been if I can't even remember either of those characters' names? Um, so yeah, I'm gonna end it with a 6 out of 10. I recommend the game if you can get it for like $20 or something, or very cheap, and um, you know, if you avoid wasting all the time that I wasted, you can pretty much clear this game in 20, maybe 30 hours. I mean, the game is honestly quite short. So yeah, that's pretty much it.